The night of December 23rd, a cold that cut straight to the bone settled over Chicago without mercy. Snow lashed in waves with the wind, thick and relentless, as if it meant to bury everything. Streetlights threw pale streaks of light through the whiteout, smeared and broken across the frozen sidewalk. At the end of the block, a small bakery gave off one of the only warm glows left in the night. The glass door was fogged with condensation, and the pastry shelves had thinned after a long day. Inside, the last employee had just turned the sign to closing soon, when the bell above the door rang. Just outside that fragile circle of warmth, pressed close to a brick wall, sat a woman and her child. Sarah leaned back against the wall, her pale fingers trembling as they clutched a thin, worn coat. Her long, light blonde hair was tangled by the bitter wind. The face that must once have looked gentle now carried the dull gray of hunger. For 3 days she had eaten nothing, saving every last crumb for her son. Her breaths came in uneven fragments, weak, as though each inhale took something from her that she no longer had to give. Beside her, Noah, a 4-year-old boy, curled into himself, trying to make his small body even smaller to escape the wind. His thin jacket offered almost no protection. Snow clung to his eyelashes, but he did not cry. Instead, he gave his mother a faint smile, as if pretending to be happy might somehow make things better. He reached out and touched her cheek. "Mom, you're so cold. Are you okay?" Sarah forced a smile, even though her lips were nearly colorless. "I'm fine, sweetheart. I'm not hungry." But Noah did not believe her. He studied her closely, with the gaze of a child who had grown up too fast. Then he took off his own old, frayed scarf and clumsily wrapped it around her neck. "Take mine, Mom. I'm warm already." Sarah turned her face away, hiding the tears that slid down her cheeks. She did not want her son to see her fear, her exhaustion, or the way she was slowly fading. Then her head sank, little by little, against the wall. Her eyes closed. "Mom," Noah whispered. "Mom, wake up. Please wake up." He shook her shoulder, desperate, but she did not move. The snow kept falling, soft and indifferent. Noah looked toward the bakery door, glowing only a few steps away. Warmth, food, safety, the things he had not known for so long. He wiped his tears. "I'll be back in a minute," he whispered, pressing a kiss to his mother's ice-cold hand. "I'll find food for you, I promise." He pushed himself up. His little boots slid on the snow, and he braced himself against the wall to keep his balance. The wind slapped his cheeks as he walked toward the bakery door. The bell rang softly. The employee looked up and froze when she saw a skinny little boy, soaked with snow, standing in the doorway, hugging himself to keep warm. His knit cap sat crooked, and his small arms shook uncontrollably. Noah stepped forward, his voice small but steady. "Ma'am, do you have any bread that's past the expiration date? My mom hasn't eaten anything. She's really tired. She hasn't eaten for 3 days." The employee stood there, stunned, unable to speak. Noah lowered his head. "Old bread is fine. Even bread you're going to throw away. My mom just needs something to eat, please." The bell rang again just as the boy began to speak. A tall man walked in, carrying his little daughter in his arms, pausing silently as he caught the child's desperate pleas. Snow drifted off his long black coat as he stopped at the threshold. He had an imposing presence, a sharp, cold gaze, the kind of gaze belonging to someone used to giving orders and being obeyed. Kaylin Ashford went still, every thought turning to ice as the boy's trembling voice reached his ears. He listened, every line, every word, like knives carving into his chest. For a moment, he forgot how to breathe, but Noah did not look at him. The boy was staring through the glass door, toward a figure slumped in the white snow outside. Kaylin followed the boy's gaze, and when he saw Sierra lying motionless out there, a chill flooded through his entire body. That image was exactly like the moment Vivian, his wife, lay in a pool of blood 2 years earlier. After the ambush, after Mikhail Resnick's gunfire, she had lain in his arms and whispered, "Take care of Lily," and then her eyes had closed. He had screamed, but her body had gone cold in his embrace, a memory he had never escaped. Lily tugged lightly at her father's coat. "Daddy, he's really scared." Eb sighed. Kaylin tightened his hold on his daughter, then turned to the employee, his voice calm but final, the voice of a man who was not accustomed to hearing no. "Give the boy your freshest loaf, and 2 cups of hot chocolate. Now." The employee hurried to comply, not daring to ask anything more. Then he knelt down and placed a steady hand on Noah's shaking shoulder. His voice softened, a softness even his closest subordinates rarely heard. "Can you take me to your mom?" Noah's eyes filled. He looked at the stranger, tall and frightening, but in those eyes there was something that made him trust. He nodded. A single tear slid down his frozen cheek as he took the man's hand. That hand was big, warm, and certain, nothing like his mother's ice-cold hand outside. And together, with Lily watching in silence from her father's arms, they stepped back into the snowy night, heading toward the woman who was the boy's whole world, the woman for whom he had walked into the bakery to beg for expired bread, the most powerful man in Chicago, and a 4-year-old boy in torn boots. 2 different worlds, crossing paths on the coldest Christmas night of the year. No one knew that in that moment, everything would change, forever. Call to action. If this story touched your heart, please press like to support emotional stories like this. Share the video with the people you love, because sometimes a story can warm an entire winter day. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel, so you will not miss the next moving journeys. The cold hit them like an invisible wall the moment they stepped out of the bakery. The wind lashed in bursts, carrying snow sharp as needles that stung the skin. Kalen held Lily tight against his chest, one arm securing his daughter, the other still gripping Noah's small hand. The boy led the way. His torn boots slid on the deep snow, but he did not stop. Each step trembled, yet it was driven by determination, as if he feared that if he lost even a single second, his mother would disappear into that white blur. It was only a few steps, but for Noah, it was an entire journey. And for Kalen, every step felt like a blade cutting deep into memories he thought he had buried. Sierra lay there, motionless, her back against the ice-cold brick wall. A thin layer of snow had settled on her shoulders, on her pale blonde hair tangled in the wind. Her face was frighteningly drained of color, her lips bloodless, parted slightly as though she were whispering something no one could hear. Noah let go of Kalen's hand, rushed to his mother, and dropped to his knees in the snow without hesitation. "Mom, I'm back. I brought someone to help." His voice caught in his throat as his small hands shook her shoulder. But Sarah did not respond. Kalen set Lily down, his voice low and firm. "Stand here with Noah. I'm going to check his mom." Lily nodded obediently, stepped closer to Noah, and took his hand as if it were pure instinct. Kalen knelt beside Sarah. He placed 2 fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse. Weak, very weak, but still there. He exhaled, not realizing until then that he had been holding his breath. Her skin was cold as stone. Her lips were a deep, bruised purple. Her breathing was as thin as a thread about to snap. Starvation, severe hypothermia. He had seen these signs before, in winter nights on the streets of Chicago, where people could die without anyone ever knowing. Without hesitation, Kalen pulled off his expensive cashmere coat and draped it over Sierra. The warmth of his body still lingered in the fabric, and he prayed it would be enough to keep her in this world for a few more minutes. He slipped one arm beneath her back, the other beneath her knees, and lifted her up. She was frighteningly light as if there were nothing left inside this body but bone and the will of a mother. Noah looked up, his eyes wide, filled with fear and hope at the same time. "Is my mom going to be okay? Is my mom going to die?" Kalen looked down at the boy. His voice softened in a way that felt almost strange, a tenderness he did not even recognize in himself. "Your mom will be okay. I promise." With one hand he pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. After a single ring, the line was answered at once. "Boss, Declan, bring the car to Holloway Bakery. Right now. Call Dr. Reeves and have him ready at the house." A brief pause, then Declan's voice came back, asking no questions at all. 2 minutes. Kalen ended the call. He stood there in the snowstorm, holding a stranger in his arms, with 2 children beside him holding hands. The snow kept falling, dusting his hair, his shoulders, but he did not move. Lily looked up at her father, her voice clear and innocent. "Daddy, does she look like Mom?" That simple question tore through Kalen's chest like a bullet. He did not answer. He only tightened his hold on Sarah, just a little. No, she did not look like Vivian. But this moment, this image, a woman lying motionless in his arms in the middle of a brutal winter night, it was the same down to every detail, and this time, he would not let anyone slip from his grasp again. The headlights of a black SUV flared at the end of the street, cutting through the white curtain of snow. The vehicle stopped. The door opened. Declan stepped out, his eyes sweeping quickly over the scene. But he asked not a single question. Kalen carried Sierra toward the car. Noah ran after him, still holding Lily's hand. 2 children, one from the hell of poverty, one from the heaven of wealth. Yet in this moment they were simply 2 children who were frightened and needed something to hold on to. Kalen laid Sarah across the back seat, her head resting against his shoulder. Noah climbed in and sat beside his mother, his small hand clasping hers, refusing to let go. Lily sat on the other side, silent, staring at the unfamiliar woman with wide, round eyes. The SUV surged into the night, slicing through darkness and the snowstorm, heading toward the Ashford estate. And in the arms of the most powerful man in Chicago, Sarah Mitchell still did not know that her life was about to turn in a completely different direction. The black SUV surged through the night, its tires grinding over the thick snow and leaving long tracks behind. Inside, warm air from the heater poured out, but it was not enough to chase away the cold that had seeped deep into Sarah's bones. She was still unconscious, her head tipped against Kaylin's shoulder, her pale blonde hair soaked with snow drooping down to veil half her ashen face. Declan drove, glancing now and then into the rearview mirror. In all the years he had followed Kaylin, he had never seen his boss carry a strange woman like this. He had never seen that look in his eyes. That look Declan had seen only once, 2 years earlier, when Vivian lay in Kaylin's arms and let out her final breath. "Boss," Declan said at last, his voice careful. "Who is she?" Kaylin did not look up. His eyes stayed on the woman's face in his arms, tracking each fragile breath. "It doesn't matter. Just drive." Declan did not ask again. He knew when silence was required. Beside Kaylin, Noah sat curled in on himself, one hand gripping his mother's hand, the other, without him even realizing when it happened, holding Lily's hand. The two children sat close together, as if searching for warmth in each other's presence. Lily tilted her head and looked at Noah, then at the unfamiliar woman. But she did not speak. She only squeezed the hand of her newly met friend, like a quiet promise. Sarah drifted in and out, her lips moving slightly. A weak whisper slipped out, so small it was nearly swallowed by the engine's hum. "Noah, my baby, I'm sorry." Noah startled and leaned toward her. "Mom, I'm here. Don't say you're sorry. I'm okay." But Sarah did not hear him. She remained sunk in unconsciousness, in a place where the pain and guilt of a mother who could not protect her child kept gnawing at her. Bit by bit, Kaylin looked down at her face. Thin, pale, worn with suffering. The delicate lines were still there, but buried under exhaustion. She had been beautiful, he could see it. Beautiful in a gentle, kind way, like someone born to love and to be loved. But life had not granted her that. Without warning, he thought of Vivian. Vivian had once lain in his arms like this, but that time, blood had soaked through her clothes. That time, he could not save her. That time, he had screamed into a Chicago winter night, and still she had grown colder, colder, until her eyes closed forever. He tightened his hold on Sarah just a little, as if afraid that if he loosened his arms, she would slip away from him the way Vivian had. The SUV turned onto a main road, then pushed deeper into the wealthy estate district in the north of the city. Massive houses slid past the windows, warm light spilling from their frames, each one its own separate world, where people ate dinner, laughed, and savored Christmas night with family. Noah stared out through the glass, his eyes wide. He had never seen houses this large, never seen iron fences trimmed with sparkling lights, never seen enormous Christmas trees standing tall in front yards, wrapped in thousands of shimmering bulbs. "It's so beautiful," the boy whispered, but his gaze snapped back to his mother, as if he feared that if he looked away from her for even a second, she would vanish. The SUV stopped before a tall iron gate. The gate opened automatically, and the vehicle glided onto a stone drive leading to a vast mansion. Warm golden light spilled from high windows. Snow lay on the tiled roof like a layer of white cream. And at the front entrance, a middle-aged man in a white coat was already waiting. Dr. Nathan Reeves. Kaylin stepped out of the SUV, Sarah still in his arms. Dr. Reeves moved in quickly, his professional eyes sweeping over her condition. "Bring her inside." Immediately. And the doors of the Ashford mansion opened, receiving a mother and child from the freezing streets outside, carrying them into a world they had never dared to dream of. Inside the mansion, warmth wrapped around them like invisible arms. Kaylin moved quickly through the vast entry hall, where a crystal chandelier cast a gentle light over the gleaming marble floor. Sarah was still unconscious in his arms, her head resting against his chest, her pale blonde hair heavy with melted snow, falling like delicate strands of silk. Dr. Reeves led the way, his steps brisk even though he was already past 40. He pushed open the doors to the large sitting room, where a long sofa had been prepared with white blankets and soft pillows. "Set her down here." Kaylin lowered Sarah carefully, as if he were afraid he might crack something precious. He stepped back, but his eyes never left her. Dr. Reeves began his examination. He checked her pulse, examined her pupils, then pressed a stethoscope to her chest. His face grew more grave with every passing second. Severe hypothermia, physical collapse, Prolonged malnutrition. He looked up at Kaylin, his voice heavy. How long has she gone without food? 3 days, Kaylin said, his voice rough. Her son said so. Dr. Reeves let out a slow breath and shook his head. 3 days in this weather, in her condition. The fact that she has made it this far is a miracle. He opened his medical case and took out an IV bag and a needle. I'm going to run fluids and electrolytes. She needs constant warming. If she makes it through tonight, she'll be fine. If she makes it through tonight. Those words hit Kaylin like a splash of ice water. He stood there, his hands clenched at his sides, his jaw tightening. In the corner of the room, Noah stood pressed against the wall, his eyes locked on his mother. He did not cry, but those reddened eyes held a fear larger than any 4-year-old should ever have to carry. Lily stood beside him, still holding his hand, silent as a small statue. Declan came up beside Kaylin, his voice low. Boss, I had someone look into her. Her name is Sarah Mitchell, 27 years old. She used to teach piano at a private school. The school shut down 6 months ago. She was evicted because she could not pay rent. No family, no one to help her. Kaylin said nothing. He only stared at the woman lying on the sofa, her face pale under the warm yellow light, and felt something inside his chest tighten. 2 hours passed. Dr. Reeves finished the IV and did a final check. Her temperature is stabilizing. Her pulse is stronger. She should wake up soon. He straightened and packed his case. I'll come back tomorrow morning. If anything seems wrong, call me immediately. Kaylin nodded. Thank you, Nathan. The doctor left, and the room settled into silence. Kaylin sat in the chair facing the sofa, his gaze still fixed on Sarah. He did not know why he was still here, why he had not handed her over to the staff and gone to bed the way he normally did, but something kept him rooted in place. Maybe it was the image of her lying in the snow tonight. Maybe it was the boy's trembling voice asking for bread past the expiration date. Maybe it was the memory of Vivian, a memory he could never bury. Then Sarah stirred. Her lashes trembled, fluttering. A faint groan slipped from lips that were still cracked and dry. Slowly, she opened her eyes. The chandelier's light stabbed at her vision. She blinked several times, struggling to focus, and then she saw it. The ceiling soaring high above her, crystal catching the light, expensive oil paintings on the walls, the soft blanket covering her body. Where am I? Panic rose like a wave. Sarah jolted upright, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. Her eyes swept the unfamiliar room, searching for the only thing that mattered. Noah. Where is Noah? Mom. That familiar voice hit her like a lifeline. Noah ran to her and threw himself into her arms with all the strength of a 4-year-old. You're awake. You're awake. Sarah wrapped her arms around her son and held him tight, as if he might disappear if she loosened her grip for even a second. Tears spilled silently and slid down her cheeks, but she made no sound. She only held him, breathing in the familiar scent of her boy, and thanked God that he was here, that he was safe. Are you okay? Are you cold? Are you hungry? She asked in a rush, her hands checking Noah all over, as if she feared he might be hurt somewhere. I'm okay, Mom. I'm fine. Noah held her hand, his eyes shining. That man saved you. He's really good. Sarah lifted her head, and for the first time, she saw the man sitting across from her. Kaylin Ashford met her gaze. His face showed no expression, but his eyes were deep, like 2 black wells. He did not speak. He only sat there, silent, imposing, and frightening in a way Sarah could not explain. She pulled Noah closer, her heart thudding hard. Where was she? And who was this man? The room sank into a heavy silence. Sarah held Noah tight, her eyes never leaving the stranger seated across from her. A mother's instinct made her pull her son behind her, even though her body was still so weak that her hands trembled. Kaylin did not move. He only sat there, watching her with eyes as sharp and cold as if he were reading every thought inside her head. His silence was more frightening than any words could have been. You are in my home. At last he spoke, his voice low and even, without a trace of emotion. You passed out in the snow for nearly 3 hours. If I had not brought you in, you would be dead. Sarah swallowed, her throat painfully dry. She looked around the room again. The crystal chandelier, the oil paintings, the Persian rug, everything radiating a kind of wealth so foreign it felt unreal. Then she looked back at the man in front of her. The black suit cut perfectly to his frame, the expensive watch on his wrist, and the way everything around him seemed to bow and obey. But what frightened her most was not his wealth. It was his eyes, cold, keen, and deep as a bottomless well. Why? She asked, her voice hoarse. Why did you help us? What do you want? Kaylin tilted his head slightly. as if her question amused him. One corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, more like a cold hint of mockery. What do you think I want from a woman who is starving to death and her 4-year-old son? Sarah went rigid. That answer did not ease her fear. It only deepened her confusion. She could not understand this man. She could not understand his motive, and in the world she had been living in, people who helped without conditions almost did not exist. I need to go. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled at once. Noah hurried to steady her, his small face tight with worry. Mom, you're still so weak. Kaylin remained seated, making no move to help. He only looked at her with the eyes of someone who had seen too much in life to be shaken by anything. Where do you plan to go? Back out into the snow? So this time you actually die? Sarah clenched her teeth. She hated her own helplessness. Hated standing before a stranger in this miserable state. Hated that she had no choice except to accept his charity. We don't need anyone's pity, she said, her voice hardening even as her heart splintered. Kaylin was silent for a long time. Then he rose and walked toward her. Sarah instinctively stepped back, pulling Noah with her. But Kaylin stopped a few paces away and did not come closer. This is not pity, he said, his voice still cold, yet carrying something else. Your son walked into that bakery, shaking in the wind and snow, asking for bread past the expiration date so his mother could have something to eat. A 4-year-old did that. And you call it pity that I did not leave the two of you to freeze? Sarah could not answer. She only stood there, tears threatening to spill, but she bit down on her lip so she would not cry. Not in front of this man, not when she had lost everything, even the last piece of her pride. Noah stepped out from behind his mother and looked up at Kaylin with clear, open eyes. Mister, please don't be mad at my mom. She's just scared. My mom is really good. She gave me all the food. Kaylin looked down at the boy. And for a moment, that cold gaze softened. Just a flicker, so quick Sarah was not sure she had truly seen it. He knelt to Noah's level, his voice gentler than before. I know your mom is good. I'm not mad. I have not, sire. Noah smiled, his first smile since his mother had collapsed in the snow. You're good too. You gave me warm bread. You saved my mom. Kaylin did not answer. He stood, turned to Sarah, his face returning to its familiar coldness. But his voice was no longer as sharp as it had been. Tonight you will stay here. Tomorrow, when you are stronger, we will talk. Then he turned and walked out of the room, giving Sarah no chance to refuse or respond. The door closed behind him, leaving Sarah standing there, her mind tangled with confusion. She did not know who that man was. She did not know why he was helping her, and she did not know whether staying tonight was salvation or a step into a world she would never belong to. But she looked at Noah, at the small face that was a little less afraid now, and she knew she had no other choice, at least for tonight. Only after the door closed did Sarah dare to let out a breath. She dropped onto the edge of the sofa, her limbs turning to water, her heart still racing wildly in her chest. Noah climbed up beside her and pressed close, as if he were afraid someone might pull them apart. The large room suddenly felt too quiet. Sarah looked around, trying to adjust to this unfamiliar setting. Everything was too beautiful, too luxurious, too different from the freezing street corner where she and her son had been curled up only hours ago. The blanket over her felt softer than anything she had ever touched. Heat from the fireplace spread through the room, wrapping around her like invisible arms. But Sarah could not relax. She kept seeing that man's eyes. Kaylin Ashford, a name she had never heard. Yet the way everyone in this house looked at him, the way they lowered their heads and obeyed without a single question, said only one thing. He was not an ordinary man. A soft knock sounded at the door. Sarah flinched, instinctively pulling Noah closer. The door opened, and a middle-aged woman stepped in, carrying a tray of food. She smiled kindly and set the tray on a small table beside the sofa. You and the little one must be hungry. This is chicken porridge and warm bread. The master said to make sure you eat something before you sleep. Sarah stared at the tray. The scent of hot porridge rose into her nose, and her stomach twisted hard. 3 days without food, her body was screaming for it. But pride made her hesitate. Thank you, but I don't. Mom, I'm hungry. Noah looked up at her, his big eyes pleading. Sarah's words caught in her throat. She looked at her son, at the thin little face that had grown far too familiar with endurance, and her heart broke all over again. She nodded, saying nothing more. The maid left quietly, leaving mother and son alone in the warm room. Sarah fed Noah spoonful by spoonful, watching him eat with real appetite, and tears rose again. She tried to hold them back, not wanting him to see his mother cry. But when Noah looked up, lifted the spoon toward her, and said, You eat too, Mom. You're hungry too. Sarah could not hold herself together anymore. She turned her face away and wiped at her tears in a hurry, then smiled at him. Okay, I'll eat. We'll eat together. Aw. They shared the bowl of porridge and the loaf of bread, sitting close together on the soft sofa. Outside the window, snow still fell. But here, in this moment, they were safe. After they finished eating, Noah's eyes began to droop. Sierra gathered her son into her arms and lay down with him, pulling the blanket over his small body. She stroked his hair and softly sang a lullaby, the same melody she had sung since Noah was a tiny newborn. Mom, Noah whispered, his voice already sleepy. Tomorrow, do we have to go back out into the snow again? Sarah was quiet for a moment. She did not know the answer. She did not know what tomorrow would look like, did not know how that man would treat them, did not know where they would go. But she held her son tighter and whispered, Tonight we sleep here. Tonight we are warm. That is what matters most. Noah smiled, then slipped into sleep. Sierra lay there, staring up at the unfamiliar ceiling, listening to her son's steady breathing. For the first time in weeks, she did not have to worry about the cold, about hunger, about whether they would survive the night. And yet she still could not sleep. Her mind kept circling back to that man, the cold eyes that sometimes softened when he looked at Noah, the voice sharp as a blade, yet never cruel, the way he had knelt down to her son's level and spoken as if the boy were an equal. Who was he? And why had he saved them? Sarah could not find the answers. But as the night moved on and the room's warmth held her, her eyelids finally grew heavy, and for the first time in a very long time, she drifted into sleep without carrying fear with her. Morning light slipped through the thick curtains, laying a pale gold stripe across the polished wooden floor. Sarah opened her eyes and needed a few seconds to remember where she was. The ceiling rose high above her, crystal chandelier, soft blanket and pillows. It was all still there. Not a dream. She turned her head. The spot where Noah had slept the night before was empty. Her heart tightened, and a mother's instinct yanked her upright at once. Noah. A child's laughter floated in from somewhere in the house. Sierra listened and recognized her son's laugh, braided together with another voice, just as clear, just as bright. Relief washed through her, but she still hurried to her feet. Her legs were unsteady, her body not fully recovered after 3 days without food or drink. Yet she could not lie still when she did not know where her son was. She stepped out of the sitting room and into a wide hallway. Oil paintings lined the walls. Fresh flower arrangements sat on stone pedestals. Everything speaking of wealth and refinement. Sarah felt out of place, like a blot of ink spreading across a sheet of pure white paper. The laughter led her to a large room with the door slightly open. She looked in and saw Noah sitting on the rug, playing with Lily. The two children were building a castle out of colorful wooden blocks, laughing as if they had known each other forever. A maid sat nearby, watching over them with a gentle smile. Mom. Noah looked up, his eyes shining when he saw her. You're awake. Look, Lily and I built a castle. Sarah stepped into the room and knelt beside her son. She smoothed his hair and checked him, making sure he was all right. You got up so early. Why didn't you wake me? Aunt Martha said you needed more sleep. Noah pointed toward the maid. She already gave me breakfast. Pancakes with honey. It was so good, Mom. Sarah looked at the woman and nodded her thanks. Martha smiled back. I also prepared breakfast for you. You need to eat something to get your strength back. Thank you, but Sarah started to refuse, but Noah's eyes stopped her. The boy was watching her with worry, as if afraid she would go without food again the way she had in the past days. Eat, Mom, you promised me. Sarah remembered last night, the promise she had made to her son, that she would eat with him. She could not take it back. Okay, I'll eat. The maid led her to the dining room, where breakfast had already been laid out on a long table. Toast, fried eggs, fresh fruit, orange juice. Sarah sat down, feeling as if she had stepped into a dream. As she ate, her eyes moved around the room and stopped on a set of clothes, folded neatly on a chair nearby. A cream-colored sweater, a pair of jeans, and a pair of sneakers. Everything was new, and when she looked closer, she realized they were exactly her size. The master had someone buy them this morning, Martha said when she noticed Sierra staring. For you and the little one. The boys' clothes are in the playroom. Sarah lifted the sweater, her fingers sliding over the soft fabric. Someone had woken early, sent someone out to buy clothes for her and her son, the right sizes, a style that fit. That thoughtfulness left her unsure what she was supposed to feel. Gratitude, yes, but also a restless unease. She was not used to being treated this way, not used to receiving without having to give something back. And she knew, in this world, nothing was free. After breakfast, She changed into the new clothes and looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was still pale, but there was more color than the night before. Her hair had been brushed neatly. She looked like an ordinary woman, not a homeless mother who had nearly frozen to death in the snow. But inside, she was still herself. Still the woman who had lost everything and did not know what tomorrow would bring. She drew in a deep breath and made a decision. She would thank that man, then take Noah and leave. She could not owe anyone, especially not someone she knew nothing about. She stepped out of the room, intending to find Kaylin and say goodbye. But the mansion was too large, and she, lost among endless hallways, did not know where she was going. Sarah walked along the hallway, her lonely footsteps echoing on the polished wood. The mansion felt like a labyrinth. Every turn led to another room, another unfamiliar space. She passed a library, where shelves rose all the way to the ceiling, past a gallery lined with marble statues, and still she could not find anyone to ask for directions. Then she heard it. A small, fragile sound, drifting back from the far end of the corridor. Not voices, not footsteps, music, piano. The instinct of someone who had lived with music made Sarah stop. She listened, her heart beating a little faster. It did not sound like a piece being performed for an audience. It sounded like a call, like something that had been forgotten for a long time and was reaching out in the dark. She followed the sound, her feet moving as if they had a mind of their own. Her steps quickened, faster and faster, until she stopped before a heavy oak door that stood slightly ajar. Sarah pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was spacious, filled with light from a large window. It poured over a glossy black grand piano. Steinway. She recognized it instantly. This was the kind of instrument she had once dreamed of owning, the kind she had only played a handful of times in her life, in big concert halls when she was still a student. A thin layer of dust lay across the lid. Clearly, no one had touched it in a long time. Sarah moved closer, her fingers trembling as they slid over the black polished wood. That familiar sensation, cool and smooth, tightened something deep in her chest. She remembered the days when she had been a piano teacher. She remembered her students' laughter. She remembered the simple joy of doing what she loved. All of it was gone. 6 months ago, when the school closed. 3 months ago, when she lost her apartment. 3 weeks ago, when she and Noah began living on the streets. But now, standing before this piano, Sarah felt as if a part of her was being awakened. She sat down on the bench and set her hands on the keys. Her fingers shook, but when she pressed the first note, the sound rang out clear and perfect, and all her fear dissolved. She began to play. The melody was slow, sorrowful, like a quiet river moving through the night. It was a piece she had written herself many years earlier, when she was young, when she was full of hope, when she still believed life would be kind to her. She had never finished it, but now, in this unfamiliar room, those unfinished notes found their way out through her hands. The music echoed through the room, spilling into the hallway, slipping into every hidden corner of the mansion. Sarah closed her eyes and let the sound lead her. She forgot where she was. She forgot the worries, the fear. There was only her and the piano, and tears sliding silently down her cheeks without her even realizing. Upstairs, in his study, Kaylin was reviewing reports when the piano reached his ears. He froze. That melody. He knew that melody. Vivian had played it hundreds of times, late at night when she could not sleep, when she missed home, when she wanted to tell him something but could not find the words. Kaylin rose and left the room, following the music as if an invisible thread were pulling him forward. He stopped at the piano room door and looked inside. Sarah sat there with her back to him, her shoulders trembling lightly with each note. Her pale blonde hair spilled down, hiding her face. But he knew she was crying. He could hear it in the music. The pain, the loss, and a deep hunger to return to something that no longer existed. He stood there, not stepping in, not speaking, only listening. And inside him, something he thought had died with Vivian 2 years earlier began to stir. The piece ended. The final note lingered, then faded into silence. Sarah opened her eyes and drew a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Then she sensed something, someone's presence. She turned. Kaylin stood in the doorway, his face still cold as stone, but in his eyes there was a kind of light she had not seen before. "I'm sorry." Sarah hurried to stand, wiping her tears. "I didn't know this room. I didn't mean to trespass. This piano belonged to my wife." Kaylin cut in, his voice low and even. Sarah fell silent. She looked at him, then at the piano, and understood why it was covered in dust, why it had been abandoned in this room. "She died 2 years ago," Kaylin continued. His voice did not tremble, but Sarah could feel the weight carried in every word. Since then, no one has been allowed to touch this piano. I'm sorry, Sarah said again, her voice breaking. I truly didn't know. I will. You play like her. The words stopped Sarah where she stood. She looked at Kalen, unsure whether he was accusing her or saying something else entirely. He offered no explanation. He only stood there, watching her with eyes too deep to read. Then he turned and walked away. But before he left the doorway, he stopped, without turning back. Don't apologize. It has been a long time since this room heard piano. Then he disappeared beyond the door, leaving Sarah standing there alone, her heart beating out of rhythm, and a strange feeling she could not name. Sarah stood motionless in the middle of the room, staring at the door where Kalen had just disappeared. His words still echoed inside her head. It has been a long time since this room heard piano. It did not sound like a reprimand. It did not sound like praise. It sounded like an old wound being touched without warning. She knew she should leave. She should go back and find Noah, should prepare to walk out of this house. But her legs refused to obey. Instead, she stepped into the hallway, moving in the direction Kalen had gone. She found him in a smaller room, something like a private gallery. Kalen stood before a large photograph hanging on the wall, his back to her. In the picture was a young woman with long, glossy black hair and a radiant smile, holding a newborn baby in her arms. Vivian. Sarah knew at once who it was. Sarah started to turn away, not wanting to intrude on something so private. But Kalen spoke. She was the daughter of an allied family. His voice was low and even, as if he were telling someone else's story. Our marriage was arranged in advance. 2 families, 1 alliance, no love, only benefit. Asuk. Sarah stayed at the doorway, not daring to move. She did not understand why he was telling her this, but she could sense that he needed to speak it aloud, and that perhaps she was the first person in a long time he could speak to. But Vivian was different, Kalen continued, his eyes still fixed on the photograph. She was good. Too good for my world. She did not care who I was, what I did. She only cared whether I came home for dinner, whether I slept enough. He paused, his jaw tightening. She taught me how to love, and I loved her, truly loved her. Sarah felt her chest draw tight. She looked at the woman's face in the photograph, at that smile, and she understood why Kalen's pain ran so deep. 2 years ago, Kalen's voice sank, heavy as stone. We were on our way home after a party. Lily was 1 year old, asleep in her mother's arms. I thought everything was fine. I was wrong. He turned and looked straight into Sarah's eyes. His gaze was no longer cold. It held a pain so deep time could not heal it. Mikhail Resnik, a Russian Mafia boss, my rival. He wanted Chicago, and I was the only obstacle. Kalen spoke, each word like a blade. He ambushed our convoy, bullets everywhere. And Vivian? He stopped and swallowed. Vivian used her body to shield Lily. Sarah raised a hand to cover her mouth, tears rising fast. When I lifted her up, her clothes were already soaked through with blood. Kalen's voice trembled, just a flicker, then steadied again. She looked at me and said, "Take care of Lily. Do not let her live in darkness like we do." Then she closed her eyes. Silence filled the room. Sarah did not know what to say. There were no words that could soften a grief like that. She only stood there with tears streaming down her cheeks, weeping for a woman she had never met, weeping for the man in front of her with a heart already shattered. "I killed all of Resnick's men that night," Kalen said, his voice cold as ice. "But he escaped. For 2 years I have hunted him, but he is like a ghost, untouchable." He turned back to the photograph and stayed quiet for a long time. "Last night when I saw you lying in the snow," he said, his voice softer, "I thought of her, thought of that night. You were lying there the way Vivian lay in my arms." He looked back at Sarah. "I could not save her, but I can save you." Adians. Sarah did not know what she should say. She only looked at him, at the man the world feared, who carried a wound inside him that would never heal. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry for what you had to live through." Kalen did not answer. He only looked at her for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "Don't apologize. You did nothing wrong." He walked toward the door, passing by her. "Lily likes playing with your son. It has been a long time since I've seen her laugh that much." Then he stopped and turned his head to look at Sarah one last time. "Stay a few more days, at least through Christmas, for the children." He did not wait for an answer. He walked away and disappeared through the doorway. Sarah stood alone in the room with Vivian's photograph looking down. She studied the woman in the picture, that gentle smile, and she whispered, She was lucky to have been loved by you. Aswa. Then she wiped her tears and stepped out, her heart heavy and yet strangely warm. She did not know what the future would bring, but at least now, she understood a little more about this mysterious man. And maybe, just maybe, staying a few more days would not be such a terrible thing. Sarah had barely stepped out of the room when the pounding of tiny feet thundered down the hallway. Lily appeared in front of her, brown curls flying, eyes bright as stars. Behind her came Noah, running too, his face glowing with the same kind of joy. Miss Sarah, Miss Sarah. Lily grabbed her hand and tugged hard. Come see the Christmas tree with us. Sarah did not even have time to react before the two children pulled her along. They led her through long hallways, down the grand staircase, and into an enormous sitting room she had not seen before. In the center of the room, a massive Christmas tree stood tall, rising almost to the ceiling. White lights were wrapped around the trunk, blinking with a soft, gentle glow. But beyond the lights, the tree was bare, not a single ornament hanging from its branches. Sarah looked around and saw Declan standing in the corner with a maid. She walked closer and asked quietly, "Why doesn't the tree have decorations?" Declan looked at her, silent for a moment, then answered in a low voice. "The boss has not celebrated Christmas since the madam died. The tree was put up for Lily, but he never decorates it." Sarah understood. For 2 years, this house had lived in the shadow of loss. Christmas was no longer a season of celebration. It was a painful reminder of the one who was gone. "Mom! Mom! Look!" Noah's voice pulled her back. She turned and saw the children had found a box of decorations from somewhere. They were trying to hang ornaments, but at their height they could only reach the very lowest branches. "I want to hang this," Lily said, holding up a sparkling silver ball. "But I can't reach." Noah was stretching on his toes, holding a tiny porcelain angel. "I can't reach either, Mom." Sarah looked at them, at the hope in their eyes, and her heart softened. She knelt and smiled at them. "Let me help." She lifted Noah up so he could hang the first ornament. His cheer rang out, clear and bright with happiness. Lily bounced beside them, waiting for her turn. Me next, Endori says. Sarah set Noah down, then lifted Lily. The little girl placed the silver ornament on a higher branch and grinned wide. "So pretty. My daddy is going to love it." They kept going, one decoration at a time. Red ornaments, gold ornaments, shimmering strands of tinsel, white cotton snowflakes. The two children laughed and played, arguing over which pieces to choose, competing for who would get lifted higher. And Sarah, for the first time in months, felt light. She did not notice when Kalen arrived. He stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, watching the scene. His face was still cold, but he did not walk away. "Daddy!" Lily saw him and ran to him at once. "Daddy, put the star on top for me. I can't reach." Kalen was silent. He looked at his daughter, then at the tree that was slowly filling with color. For 2 years, he had avoided everything tied to Christmas. For 2 years, he had let this house sink into darkness. But now, looking into Lily's shining eyes, he could not refuse. He stepped forward and lifted his daughter onto his shoulders. Lily held the golden star high and placed it on the top of the tree. Light from the star reflected down, making the whole tree blaze with brightness. "It's so beautiful," Lily cried, clapping her hands. Noah stood nearby, looking up with admiration spilling across his face. Then he turned to Sarah, his voice tiny but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Mom, I wish I had a dad too." Sarah's throat tightened. She pulled her son into her arms and held him close, not knowing what to say. Kalen heard it. He set Lily down and looked at the little boy buried against his mother. Something inside Kalen's chest shifted, something he had tried to bury a long time ago. Without a word, he walked over and knelt to Noah's level. Then he lifted the boy, the way he had lifted Lily, and carried him to the tree. "What do you want to hang?" Noah stared at him, eyes wide with shock. Then the boy chose a blue ornament and hung it on the highest branch he could reach. "Thank you, Mr. K," he said, his voice clear. Kalen did not answer. He only gave a small nod. But when he set Noah down, his gaze met Sarah's. She was looking at him, tears shining in her eyes, yet a smile rested on her lips. The first real smile he had seen from her. And in that moment, the room brightened. Not only because of the Christmas tree, but because for the first time in 2 years, this house held the laughter of a family. The sunset faded beyond the windows, giving way to the night of Christmas Eve as it settled over the city. Snow still fell softly, laying a pure white layer over rooftops and the trees lining the road. Inside the Ashford mansion, The air felt warm and strangely lively, a change so unexpected that even the longtime staff could not hide their surprise. Sarah stood in the kitchen, kneading dough. She had asked for permission to cook dinner as a thank you for Kaylin's help, and though the housekeeper had hesitated at first, she finally agreed when she saw the sincerity in Sarah's eyes. Noah and Lily sat on 2 tall stools at the kitchen island, helping Sarah by kneading little lumps of dough she gave them. Dough clung to their hands, their faces, even to Lily's nose, but the 2 children laughed as if this were the most wonderful game in the world. "Mom, I made a star," Noah said, holding up a misshapen lump with pride. "Mine is a heart," Lily announced, not to be outdone, lifting a shape that was even more crooked. Sarah laughed, wiped her hands on her apron, and smoothed both their hair. "They're beautiful. We'll bake them with the big bread." Texas. The scent of herb-roasted chicken filled the kitchen, mingling with buttery mashed potatoes and sautéed vegetables. These were not the lavish dishes a mansion like this usually served. They were family food, simple and warm, carrying love in every ingredient. When dinner was set on the long dining table, Sarah felt a flutter of nerves. She did not know if Kaylin would accept these humble dishes, or if he would find them unworthy of a dining room so elegant, with its crystal chandelier and expensive oak furniture. Kaylin walked in wearing his familiar black suit, but he had removed his tie. It was a small change, yet it made him look a little less distant. Lily ran to him at once and tugged him toward the table. "Daddy, Miss Sarah cooked for us, and there are star cookies I made too." Kaylin looked at the table, then at Sarah. She stood beside the chair, gripping the edge of her apron, trying to hide how nervous she felt. "I wanted to thank you for helping us. It's just simple food, but—" "Sit down," Kaylin cut in, but his voice was not cold. He pulled out a chair and sat, and Lily climbed into the seat beside him right away. Sarah sat across from him, with Noah beside her. The meal began in silence, with only the sound of silverware against plates, but little by little, the children's laughter broke the tightness in the air. Lily told Noah about her favorite teddy bear, and Noah bragged to Lily that his mother played the piano beautifully. "Miss Sarah plays like an angel," Lily said, turning to her father, eyes shining. "Did you hear her?" "I heard the piano this morning." Kaylin did not answer his daughter, but his gaze slid over Sarah for a brief moment. Sarah lowered her eyes, pretending to focus on cutting Noah's food. As the meal neared its end, Kaylin set down his fork and knife and looked at Sarah. "You used to be a piano teacher." It was not a question. It was a statement. Sarah looked up and nodded. "Yes. At a private school in the suburbs of Chicago. I taught there for 5 years. Until the school closed. And after that?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, watching Noah happily talking with Lily at the far end of the table. He did not need to hear this painful story again. "My husband left when he found out I was pregnant," she said, her voice light as air. "He left behind debt and disappeared. I raised Noah alone, working 3 jobs at the same time to pay off the debt and cover rent. Then the school closed, and I lost my main job. Part-time work was not enough to survive." She drew in a slow breath. 2 months ago, the landlord threw us out. We lived in the car for a while. Then the car was towed because I could not pay the fines. For 3 weeks, we have been living on the streets." She said it without bitterness, without tears. Only the plain truth, raw and painful. Kaylin listened, his jaw tightening, but not because he was angry at her. He was angry at a life that had been so unjust to this woman. "I don't need anyone's pity," Sarah continued, her voice turning firmer. "I just need a chance to stand up again. I don't want to be a burden to anyone." Kaylin was silent for a long time. Then he spoke, his voice low but not cold. "You are not weak. You have just been carrying too much alone." Sarah lifted her eyes to him. For the first time, she saw not pity in his gaze, but respect, understanding. At some point the children had finished eating. Now they were nodding off in their chairs. Lily's head rested on Noah's shoulder, and Noah's eyes drooped as he fought not to fall asleep. Kaylin stood and walked over to them. Without a word, he lifted both children, one in each arm, and carried them out of the dining room. Sarah watched, her heart tightening. The image of the most powerful man in Chicago carrying 2 small children, one his own daughter, one the son of a woman he had met less than a day ago, was so beautiful it stung her eyes. She rose, quietly cleared the table, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a small thread of hope flicker inside her. Maybe life still held good things. Maybe there were still good people. And maybe, just maybe, she had met the right person at the right time. It was late. The mansion had settled into silence. The children had been put to bed long ago, sleeping deeply in the warm room, the two of them lying side by side as if they had been best friends since they were very small. Sarah checked on Noah one more time before she left, pulled the blanket higher over her son, and kissed his forehead. She was not sleepy. Her mind spun with too many thoughts, too many feelings she did not know how to arrange. She wandered downstairs, her feet moving without intention, until they brought her to the grand sitting room, where the Christmas tree still blinked softly in the dark. The fireplace was still burning, flames flickering and throwing dancing shadows across the walls. Sarah sank into an armchair beside the hearth, pulled her legs up, and stared into the fire as if it might hold answers to questions she was afraid to speak aloud. She did not hear footsteps, but she felt someone there. When she turned her head, she saw Kalen walking into the room, 2 mugs in his hands. He said nothing. He set one mug on the small table beside her, then sat in the chair across from her. Steam rose from the cup. The scent of hot chocolate warmed the air. "I don't drink alcohol," he said, as if explaining. "And you shouldn't either, not while your body is still recovering." Sarah looked at the hot chocolate, then at him. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a long time, with only the crackle of the fire and the wind outside the windows. It was not awkward. It was not tense. It was simply the quiet of 2 people staring into the same flames, each carrying wounds they did not know how to speak. Then Kalen spoke, his voice low, softer than usual. "Are you afraid of me?" Sarah turned toward him, surprised by the question. She thought for a moment, then answered honestly, "I know who you are." Declan couldn't really hide it. The way everyone calls you boss, the way they lower their heads and obey without questions. "I'm not stupid." Kalen watched her, waiting. "But I'm not afraid," Sarah continued, her voice steady. "I've lived with fear for too long, afraid of hunger, afraid of cold, afraid my son would be taken by child services because I couldn't provide for him, afraid that one day I would fall asleep in the snow and never wake up." She met his eyes. "You're not as frightening as those things." Kalen was quiet. No one had ever spoken to him that way. People either feared him, flattered him, or tried to use him. No one had ever looked straight into his eyes and said he was less frightening than hunger and cold. "I saved you for a selfish reason," he said evenly. "That night, when I saw you lying in the snow, I wasn't thinking about you. I was thinking about Vivian." Sarah listened, not interrupting. "You were lying there exactly the way she lay in my arms, pale, frozen, slipping away from me." He looked into the fire, his gaze distant. "I could not save her. Even though I'm the most powerful man in this city, even though I can buy anything, kill anyone, I still couldn't save the person I loved." His voice trembled slightly, only for a moment. "I didn't want that to happen again, to anyone." Sarah felt a sharp ache in her chest. She looked at the man across from her, the man the world feared, and saw the wound in him that would never truly heal. She understood that feeling. Helplessness, the desperate need to protect someone and failing, the guilt that ate at the soul, day after day. She set her mug down, leaned forward, and placed her hand gently over his. "That wasn't your fault." Kalen looked down at her hand, small and warm against his. He did not pull away. He did not speak. He only sat there and let that warmth spread. They stayed like that in silence, the fire flickering, snow falling beyond the windows, and something shifted between them. Not love, not yet, but connection, understanding, a quiet compassion between 2 souls life had wounded. Sarah stood, meaning to go to bed. But at the doorway she stopped and looked back at him. "Thank you, not only for saving my life, but for," she hesitated, searching for the right words, "for treating us like people." Then she walked away, leaving Kalen alone by the fire. He watched her disappear beyond the door, then looked down at his hand, where her warmth still lingered. For the first time in 2 years, his chest did not feel as heavy. And maybe, just maybe, this house would not feel so cold anymore. The pounding of tiny feet in the hallway jolted Sarah out of sleep. She opened her eyes as morning light poured through the curtains, catching the fine dust drifting in the air. Before she could even sit up, the bedroom door flew open and Noah and Lily burst in like 2 small storms. "Mom, Miss Sarah, wake up. Santa came." Sarah looked at the children. Their eyes shone like stars, their cheeks flushed with excitement. She had not even understood what was happening when Lily seized her hand, her voice high and urgent. "There are presents under the tree, so many. Hurry." Sarah hurried into her sweater and let them pull her down the stairs. When she stepped into the sitting room, she froze. Beneath the Christmas tree they had decorated yesterday, colorful gift boxes were piled high, red wrapping paper, blue, gold, silver, sparkling bows, Big boxes and little ones stacked together like a small hill. Noah stood there, his mouth hanging open, his eyes so wide Sarah feared they might fall right out. "Mom, is this real?" Sarah did not know what to say either. She looked around and saw Kalen standing by the window, a cup of coffee in his hand, watching the scene. His eyes were as cold as ever, but when he saw the children's astonished faces, the corner of his mouth lifted just slightly. Lily did not wait another second. She dove into the pile of gifts, searching for boxes with her name. "This one is mine. And this one too. Noah, this one is yours." 8. Noah looked at his mother as if asking permission. Sarah nodded and smiled, and the boy ran to Lily. The two of them began opening gifts with a joy they could not contain. The rip of wrapping paper, the squeals, the bright laughter filled the room. Noah opened the first box and found an enormous Lego set, the kind he had only ever dared to dream about while staring through a toy store window. The second box held a thick winter coat, warm and heavy, in navy blue, his favorite color, and the third box, when he opened it, made him go still. A toy piano, small and lovely, with perfect black and white keys. Noah looked up at Kalen, his eyes shining with tears. Then without a word, he ran over and wrapped his arms around the man's leg. "Thank you, Mr. Kai. Thank you so much." Kalen stood rigid for a moment. He was not used to being hugged like that, not by anyone except Lily. But then, slowly, he placed his hand on the boy's head and patted him, awkwardly, gently. "Play well, like your mom." Noah lifted his face and beamed. It was the first smile Sarah had seen on her son's face in months that carried not a trace of worry. Lily tugged on Sarah's hand and held out a gift wrapped in gleaming silver paper. "Miss Sarah, this one is for you." Sarah looked at the gift, then at Kalen. He did not look back at her. He only took a sip of coffee as if nothing at all was happening. She opened the box with trembling hands. Inside was a cream-colored cashmere scarf, soft and warm, and beneath the scarf was a new book of sheet music. Sarah lifted it and turned the first pages. These were pieces she had dreamed of playing. Classic works she had only listened to, never owned, never had the chance to hold in her hands. "How did you know I—" She looked up, her voice catching. "Declan investigated," Kalen said calmly. "You won a piano award when you were in college. Second year, if I remember correctly. And hysteria." Sarah stared at him, tears rising fast. Someone had taken the time to learn about her past, about what she had once loved and dreamed of. Someone had cared enough to do that. Before she could say anything, Lily ran over and handed her a folded piece of paper, creased carefully. "This is my gift for Miss Sarah." Sarah opened it. It was a drawing in colored pencil, messy, but overflowing with feeling. 4 people stood beneath a Christmas tree. A tall man, a blonde woman, 2 children holding hands. Above the drawing, in the uneven, childlike handwriting of a 4-year-old, were the words, "Lily's new family." Sarah looked at the picture, then at the little girl standing in front of her with eyes full of hope. Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks, and she did not bother to wipe them away. She knelt and pulled Lily into her arms. "Thank you. This is the most beautiful gift I have ever received. And in the room filled with Christmas morning light, in the middle of children's laughter and the warmth of the fireplace, Sarah felt for the first time what it meant to belong somewhere. That peaceful moment did not last long. Just as the children's laughter was echoing through the room, Kalen's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen and his face hardened at once. Without a word, he stepped out of the sitting room and closed the door behind him. Sarah watched him go, unease creeping under her skin. She forced a smile for the children, but her eyes kept flicking back to the door where Kalen had disappeared. In his study, Kalen stood by the window with the phone to his ear. Declan's voice came through the line, tense. "Boss, our source just reported it. Resnick is on the move. He knows you're at the mansion, and he knows there are new people in the house." Kalen tightened his grip on the phone, his jaw clenching. What does he know about them? Not all the details yet, but he has people watching. There are photos of the woman and the child from security camera footage at the bakery that night. Declan paused. "Boss," he sent a message. "Read it." Declan's voice dropped. "Ashford, I thought you learned your lesson after your wife died. But you brought people into your house. This time, I'll kill them all. Merry Christmas." Silence swallowed the room. Kalen stood perfectly still, but inside him, rage boiled like a volcano about to break. Resnick, the man who had killed Vivian, the man he had hunted for 2 years, and now he was aiming at Sarah and Noah. "Double security immediately," Kalen said, his voice ice. No one enters or leaves the mansion without my order. Call everyone in. Meeting in 1 hour. Yes, boss. Kalen ended the call and stood there for a long moment, staring out the window. Snow still fell, whitening the garden, but he no longer saw beauty in it. He saw danger hiding in every shadow. He had pulled Sierra and Noah into this storm. By saving them, he had made them targets. When Kalen returned to the sitting room, his face had settled back into its familiar coldness. The children were still playing with their new toys, but Sierra saw the change in his eyes right away. She knew something was wrong. After Martha led the children away to bathe and change clothes, Sarah went to Kalen's study. She stopped at the door, left slightly open, and heard several men's voices inside. Resnick has about 50 gunmen, Declan said. He's gathering forces at the warehouse on the south side. Our source says he plans to strike tonight or tomorrow. How many do we have? Kalen's voice. 60 men we can move right now, but if he hits the mansion, we'll be on the defensive. Essa. Then don't let him strike first, Kalen said, his voice sharp as a blade. We hit him first, tonight. Sarah stood there, her blood turning cold. She had heard enough. Gang, attack, gunmen. The words confirmed what she had suspected from the beginning. Kalen was not just a wealthy businessman, he was a mafia boss. And the man in that meeting, Resnick, was targeting them. Because of her, because she and Noah had entered Kalen's life, she backed away, her shaking steps carrying her to her room. Her mind spun. She had to leave. She could not stay here and put Noah in danger. She could not be the reason more people were hurt or killed. That night, when everyone was asleep, Sarah quietly packed their things. She did not have much, only the clothes she had arrived in and the new set Kalen had bought for her. She tucked the blanket around Noah as he slept, kissed his forehead, then gently woke him. Noah, wake up. We have to go. Noah blinked himself awake, still groggy. Go where, Mom? I want to stay here with Lily. Sierra bit her lip, fighting back tears. I know, but we can't stay. We have to leave before. Before what? That deep voice made Sierra jump. She turned and saw Kalen standing in the doorway, arms crossed, his cold eyes fixed on her. Where do you think you're going? He asked, his voice flat, without emotion. Sarah stood, facing him even though her heart was pounding out of control. I heard your meeting. I know someone is coming for you, and they know about us. She drew in a breath. I can't stay here and put you in danger. We have to go. Kalen did not answer right away. He stepped into the room, closed the door behind him, and looked at her with eyes she could not read. You think you'll be safer out there? He asked, his voice low. Resnick has seen your face. He knows about Noah. You leave this place, you die. And your son does too. Sierra shuddered. She knew he was right, but she could not accept it. That's my problem, she said, her voice hard even as her hands trembled. I don't want to bring disaster to anyone anymore. I've brought enough misery into my own life. Kalen took one step closer, something flaring in his eyes. This is not about you. His voice suddenly turned razor cold. This is about your son. Do you want Noah to be an orphan? Do you want him to grow up without a mother, the way Lily is growing up without one? The words hit Sierra like a bucket of ice water. She stood there, her lips trembling, unable to speak. Kalen exhaled, then moved closer. His voice dropped, no longer sharp, but carrying a sincerity she had never heard from him before. I lost Vivian because I could not protect her. I will not let that happen again. Not to anyone in this house, even Rekshin. Sierra looked at him and saw in his eyes not pity, but resolve. And maybe there was something else too, something she did not dare to name. Stay, he said, his voice quiet but firm. Let me protect you. Sarah stood facing Kalen, her heart feeling as if it had been torn in two. One part of her wanted to stay, wanted to believe what he was saying, wanted to be protected after so many months of carrying everything alone. But another part, the part that had grown used to being abandoned and betrayed, was screaming at her to run. Why? She asked, her voice breaking. Why do you care? We're strangers. You don't owe us anything. Kalen was silent for a long time. He stood there, moonlight from the window brushing his angular face, making his deep eyes stand out as they watched her without blinking. I don't know. When he finally answered, his voice was low and so honest it startled Sarah. I don't know why, but when you sat at the piano that day, when I heard the music in a room that had been silent for 2 years, He stopped, his jaw tightening as if he were fighting himself. I didn't want you to leave. Sierra felt her heart skip. It was not a confession of love. She knew that. But for a man like Kalen, a man who had locked his heart shut for 2 years, it was the biggest confession he could make. You don't understand. She shook her head as tears began to slide down her cheeks. I've brought misfortune to everyone who stays near me. My husband left. My family turned their backs when they found out I was pregnant without a husband. Friends walked away when I fell into poverty. I'm like a curse. And now, because of me, your enemy is coming for you. Resnick was coming for me long before you ever appeared. Kalen cut in, his voice turning cold. He wants me dead not because of you, but because I'm the only obstacle in his path to taking Chicago. You're not the cause. You're only the excuse he's using. Sarah looked at him with reddened eyes. But if we weren't here, you wouldn't be distracted. You wouldn't have to worry about 2 more people. Kalen stepped forward, closing the distance between them. He stood so close she could feel the warmth coming off his body. You think I would worry less if you left? He asked, his voice dropping. You think I would rest easy knowing you and Noah are out there with no one protecting you while Resnick is hunting you? Sarah could not answer. She only stood there, looking up at him. And for the first time, she saw not coldness in his eyes, but fear. Fear of losing someone again. I watched Vivian die in my arms, Kalen said, his voice trembling for a brief moment. I felt her body grow colder, little by little, and I could do nothing to stop it. For 2 years, I've lived with that memory every day, every night. He met her eyes. I can't endure that happening again. Not with you. Sarah felt something inside her melt. She looked at the man in front of her, the man the world feared, standing here and opening his heart to her in a way he perhaps had not opened it to anyone since his wife died. I'm scared, she whispered, her voice thin as thread. I'm scared to trust someone and be abandoned again. I'm scared to hope and be disappointed. I'm scared Noah will be hurt if what? Sarah swallowed and looked down. If he starts to see you as a father, and then you disappear from his life. Silence filled the room. Kalen looked at her, then looked toward Noah asleep on the bed, the boy completely unaware of the conversation taking place. I don't know what the future will be, Kalen said slowly, weighing every word. I can't promise everything will be fine, but I can promise you this. As long as I'm breathing, I will not let anyone harm you or Noah. Sarah searched his eyes for a lie, but she found nothing there except sincerity. She lifted her hand, slowly, hesitantly, and placed it against his chest, right over the strong heartbeat beneath his shirt. I'll stay, she said, her voice small but steady. Not because I'm afraid, but because... She paused, searching for the right words. Because I don't want to leave either. Kalen said nothing. He only placed his hand over hers, holding it there against his chest. And in the quiet room, with moonlight spilling through the window and Noah's steady breathing on the bed, the 2 of them stood there, needing no more words. Maybe this was not love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something neither of them had dared to believe they could find again. Hope. The next morning, the Ashford mansion had turned into a fortress. Sarah looked out through the window and saw men in black stationed everywhere, along the fence line, at the main gate, in the garden, even up on the roof. Guns were hidden beneath their coats, and their eyes kept sweeping every shadowed corner without pause. She tried to keep things normal in front of the children. Noah and Lily still played together, unaware of the storm about to break. She kept them busy with coloring, with storybooks, with Lego, with anything that would hold their attention and keep them from asking questions about the unfamiliar men moving through the house. Kalen met with Declan and his men all morning. When he came out of his study at midday, his face was tight, his eyes sharper than ever. He found Sarah in the playroom, where she sat beside the children. I need to talk to you, he said in a low voice meant only for her. Sarah nodded, asked Martha to watch the children, and followed Kalen into the hallway. Tonight I'm leaving, he said plainly, without easing into it. We're going to hit Resnick's base before he can make his move. Declan will stay here with a team to protect the house and to get you and the children somewhere safe if anything happens. Before Kalen left, Declan had taken Sarah aside. He showed her the heavy oak door leading to the basement and pointed to a hidden keypad. If you hear gunshots, he had warned her grimly, take the children here and lock the door. Do not come out for anyone but me or Kalen. Sarah felt an invisible hand squeeze her heart. And what about you? Kalen looked at her and did not answer right away. He lifted his hand and, without thinking, brushed her cheek with his fingertips, then pulled his hand back at once as if he had touched fire. I will come back. You can't promise that, Sarah said, her voice shaking. You're walking into danger, facing the man who killed your wife. You can't promise you'll come back. True, Kalen nodded, admitting it. I can't promise, but I'll do everything I can to keep that promise. Sarah watched him, the man about to step into a fight that could take his life. She wanted to say something, wanted to stop him, but she knew she could not. This was his world. This was a war he had to face, not only to protect her and the children, but to avenge Vivian. You have to come back, she said, steadier than she expected. Lily needs you. And Noah. She stopped and swallowed. Noah needs you too. Kalen looked at her, and his eyes softened for a moment. He did not ask, "And what about you?" But the question hung in the air between them. Before he could say more, the sound of tiny feet running made them both turn. Lily rushed into her father, wrapping her arms around his leg. "Where are you going, Daddy?" "Aunt Martha said you have to go to work." Airy bows. Kalen knelt and looked into his daughter's eyes. "I have something I need to do. I'll come back as soon as I can." "You promise you'll come back?" Lily asked, her wide eyes full of worry. "I promise," Kalen said, kissing her forehead. Noah ran up too and stood beside Lily, looking up at Kalen with a seriousness too old for a boy his age. "Mr. Kai, you're a superhero. Superheroes always win." Kalen looked at the boy, and for the first time in a long time, he smiled. Not a faint smile, not a mocking one. A real smile, warm and honest. "I'll try," he said, patting Noah's head. Then he stood and looked at Sarah one last time. No goodbye, no promises. Only a look, deep and full of meaning. Then he turned and walked out the door. Sarah stood there with both children in her arms, watching his figure disappear beyond the doorway. Her heart tightened in her chest, and she prayed, for the first time in many years, that he would come back. Kalen's convoy tore into the black night, ripping through the thick, relentless snowfall. He sat in the back seat, a loaded gun resting steady in his hand, his eyes fixed straight ahead without the slightest emotion. Beside him, his most trusted men were silent too, tight with tension, waiting for the fight that was coming. The plan was simple. Hit the Southside warehouse, where Resnick was gathering his forces. Strike first, before he could move. End this war that had dragged on for 2 years, once and for all. But when the vehicles arrived, something felt wrong at once. The warehouse was dark, empty, not a single figure, not a single sound. The metal doors stood wide open, as if the place were waiting for them. "Something's not right," one of the men said. Kalen already knew. The moment he saw that terrifying emptiness, his instincts screamed a warning. He pulled out his phone and dialed Declan. No one answered. His heart dropped as if into a pit. "Turn around. Back to the mansion. Now." The convoy spun back at a breakneck speed, racing toward Chicago. All the way there, Kalen called Declan again and again. He called Martha. He called anyone at the mansion. No one picked up. He understood. Resnick had fooled them. At the same time, inside the Ashford mansion, hell had broken loose. The first gunshot cracked through the air just as Sarah had finished putting the children into bed. She jerked, instinct taking over, and pulled Noah and Lily tight, dragging them down to the floor. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. Gunfire erupted in bursts, echoing through the house. "Mom, I'm scared," Noah cried, clinging to her. "Quiet, sweetheart. Quiet, and follow me." Sarah forced her voice steady even as her heart pounded like it would break her ribs. She remembered what Declan had told her. If anything happened, take the children to the safe room in the basement. A steel door, a keypad lock, strong enough to hold against an assault. Sarah gathered both children into her arms and ran down the hall. Darkness swallowed the mansion. The power had been cut. The only light came from flames flaring somewhere below and the white flash of gunfire. She ran. She ran as if she had never run in her life. Down the stairs, through corridors, toward the door that led to the basement. But the moment her hand touched the knob, a cold voice spoke behind her. "Where are you rushing off to?" Sarah froze. Slowly, she turned. A man stepped out of the shadows. Tall, white silver hair, gray eyes sharp as blades, and in his hand, a gun aimed straight at her. Mikhail Resnick. "Well, here you are." He smiled. A smile that never reached his eyes. The gift Ashford values more than his own life. Sarah shoved the children behind her and covered them with her body. "What do you want?" Resnick walked closer, slow and unhurried, as if he were strolling through a park. "I want Kalen Ashford to suffer. I want him to feel the pain I felt when he destroyed my empire. And the best way to do that," he shifted his gun toward Noah, "is to kill the people he cares about." "No," Sarah screamed, pushing Noah and Lily farther behind her. Noah stopped crying. He stood there, small, but filled with fierce determination, stretching his arms out to shield Lily behind him. "Don't you touch my mom!" the boy shouted, his voice trembling, but he did not step back. Resnick looked at him, then laughed. "Brave little brat. You remind me of Ashford when he was young." He tilted his head. "Shame it's pointless." He raised the gun and aimed at Sarah. "Say your last words." Sarah closed her eyes and pulled the children tight against her. She did not beg. She did not plead. She only thought of Noah, the son she loved more than her own life. She wished she could have protected him better. She wished she could. The gunshot exploded, but it did not come from Resnick. Sarah's eyes flew open. Resnick staggered, his shoulder soaked in blood. He spun, his face twisting with rage. Kalen stood at the far end of the hallway, smoke still curling from the barrel of his gun. His eyes were bloodshot, not from tears, but from the fury burning inside him. "Resnick." Kalen's voice was ice. "This time you're not getting away." Resnick laughed wildly, even as blood streamed from his shoulder. "Ashford, you finally showed up. I've been waiting for this moment for 2 years." The two men faced each other, guns in hand, hatred in their eyes. The air seemed to harden, as if time itself had turned to stone, and then everything detonated. Gunfire thundered. Bullets tore through the space between them. Sarah curled around the children in the corner, shielding them with her body, praying for this nightmare to end. The narrow hallway turned into a battlefield. Kalen and Resnick moved like two hunting beasts, slipping behind pillars and corners, waiting for the moment to finish the other. Bullets screamed through the air, burying themselves in walls, in doors, in anything that got in their way. Sarah held Noah and Lily tight in the corner, shielding them with her body. She could feel the children's panicked breathing, their strangled sobs, but she could do nothing except keep them safe and pray. Resnick lunged out from behind a pillar and fired in rapid bursts toward Kalen. One bullet tore past Kalen's shoulder, blood soaking his white shirt. But he did not stop. He could not stop, not with Sarah and the children right there, in the enemy's line of fire. "You think you can protect them?" Resnick laughed, his voice bouncing through the darkness. "You couldn't protect your wife. You won't protect them either." Kalen clenched his teeth. Pain spread from the wound through his body, but the fury inside him was stronger. He remembered Vivian. He remembered the night she lay in his arms and let out her final breath. He remembered the promise he made to himself, that he would never let that happen again. He surged forward and fired back. A bullet struck Resnick's leg, dropping him hard to the floor, but Resnick did not release his gun. He lifted his arm and aimed straight at Sarah. "If I die, I'll take everything you love with me." Kalen did not think. He threw himself toward Sarah, covering her with his body at the exact moment the gunshot exploded. Pain, a tearing pain ripped through his back. He heard Sarah scream. He heard the children crying, but it all felt far away, blurred, like sound underwater. He fell, blood spreading across the floor, and then another shot rang out. Declan appeared behind Resnick, smoke still curling from his gun. The bullet drove through Resnick's chest. Resnick collapsed to the floor, eyes wide, mouth open in shock. "Boss." Declan sprinted to Kalen, his face gone pale. Sarah crawled to Kalen's side, her hands shaking as she pressed them against the bleeding wound in his back. Kalen, look at me." He opened his eyes and looked at her. His lips tried to form a faint smile. "The kids, are they okay?" Sarah sobbed, tears dropping onto his face. "They're okay. They're okay because of you. But you have to hold on. Do you hear me?" Noah and Lily ran over and dropped to their knees beside Kalen. Lily cried hard, clutching her father's hand. "Daddy, don't leave me." Noah was crying too, but he fought to hold it back. "Mr. K, you're a superhero. Superheroes can't lose." Kalen looked at the two children, then at Sarah. He wanted to say something, but the pain stole his voice. He only reached for Sarah's hand and gripped it tightly, as if it were the only thread keeping him tied to this world. "The ambulance is coming," Declan shouted, phone to his ear. "Hold on, boss." Sarah bent down and pressed her forehead to Kalen's. "You promised you'd come back. You can't break that promise. Do you hear me?" Kalen looked at her, into those tear-filled eyes, and something flared inside him. Not rage, not pain, will. The will to live, to stay with her, with the children, with the family he had never expected to find. He gave a small nod, his lips shaping one word Sarah could barely hear. Promise. The wail of an ambulance siren rose outside. Red and blue lights flashed through shattered windows. Declan and the medics rushed in and lifted Kalen onto a stretcher. Sarah held his hand until they pushed the stretcher out to the ambulance. She stood there, arms around Noah and Lily, watching the vehicle race away into the snowy night, and she prayed. Prayed that his promise would be kept. In the corner of the hallway, Resnick lay motionless, blood pooling beneath him. 2 years of hatred, 2 years of hunting, finally ending here. In the mansion he had wanted to turn into a grave for his enemy, but he had lost. And the nightmare that had haunted the Ashford family had finally come to an end. A week passed like one long nightmare. Kaylin lay in the intensive care unit of a private hospital, where Dr. Reeves and the best medical team in the city stayed on watch 24 hours a day. The bullet had gone through his back, missing his spine by a breath. The surgery lasted 6 hours, and for the first 3 days, he did not wake. Sarah did not leave the hospital. She sat by his bed day and night, only stepping away when she had to check on the children, who were being cared for by Declan and Martha at the mansion for the time being. She held Kaylin's hand. She talked to him even though he could not hear. She read to him even though his eyes stayed closed. On the 4th day, Kaylin opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Sarah dozing in the chair beside his bed, her hand still locked around his. Pale blonde hair fell forward, hiding half her face. Dark circles shadowed her eyes from lack of sleep. But to him, she was still beautiful. Beautiful in a way he had not believed he would ever see again since Vivian was gone. He moved his fingers and gave her hand a gentle squeeze. Sarah startled awake, her eyes going wide when she saw him looking at her. "Kaylin," her voice broke, tears pouring down. "You're awake. You're awake." He wanted to speak, but his throat was dry as sand. Sarah quickly lifted a cup of water to his lips and helped him drink in small sips. "The kids." His voice was rough, barely a whisper. "They're okay." Sarah smiled through her tears. "They're okay because of you. Lily asks about her dad every day. And Noah." She paused, her voice catching. "Noah draws you pictures every day. He says when the superhero wakes up, he'll have gifts to see." Kaylin closed his eyes, warmth spreading through his chest. He had survived. He had kept his promise. A week later, he was discharged to a new mansion, safer, prepared by Declan. Noah and Lily ran to him the moment he stepped through the door, clinging to his legs as if afraid he might vanish again. He knelt and pulled both children into his arms, and for the first time in many years, he felt whole. A few days later, when Kaylin was stronger, he called Sarah to his study. She stepped inside, still a little nervous the way she always was when he wanted to speak to her alone. "There's something I want to offer you," he said, sliding a folder of papers toward her. Sarah looked down, her heart beating faster. They were documents for ownership of an apartment and an employment contract at a respected music school. "The apartment will be in your name," Kaylin explained, "and Whitmore Academy is looking for a piano teacher. I'm their main sponsor, so introducing you won't be difficult." Sarah stared at the papers, then at him, stunned. "I can't take this. It's too—" "This isn't charity," Kaylin cut in, his voice gentle. "You're a good teacher. They need you. And the apartment, consider it rent. It can be deducted little by little from your salary." Sarah understood. He was giving her a way to stand on her own feet again. Not a handout, not pity. "Why are you doing all of this?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Kaylin was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and stepped closer. "Because you reminded me life isn't only darkness. Because Lily laughs more since you and Noah came. And because—" He paused, searching for the words. "Because for the first time in 2 years, I want to wake up every morning." Sarah looked at him, her eyes shining. He turned away, his voice lowering. "You don't have to stay close. Live your life. I just want you to have a choice." Sarah stood there, looking at the broad back of the man who had saved her life, who had shielded her and her son with his own body, the man the world feared, who had treated her with a respect and gentleness she had never received from anyone. She stepped forward and laid her hand on his shoulder, making him turn back to her. "What if I want to stay close?" she asked, her voice light as wind. "What if I don't want to be only the woman who received an apartment and a job, but want—" She stopped, her heart pounding. "Want to be part of your life?" Kaylin looked at her, his eyes softening, deep and full of feeling. He lifted his hand and touched her cheek, gentle as if he were afraid she might break. "Then I'd be the luckiest man in Chicago." 1 year later, on the night of December 24th, the Ashford mansion overflowed with laughter and shimmering lights. The Christmas tree stood proudly in the center of the sitting room, decorated with ornaments the whole family had chosen together. The scent of baked cookies and hot chocolate drifted through the air, mingling with soft Christmas music from a small speaker. Sarah sat at the piano, her fingers gliding over the keys as she played a piece she had been composing throughout the past year. Beside her, Noah and Lily sat close together, eyes fixed on her hands, moving as if by magic. The 5-year-old boy now knew how to play a few simple songs, and Lily always insisted on sitting beside brother Noah whenever she practiced. Kalen leaned against the doorway, arms folded across his chest, watching the scene. His face was no longer as cold as it used to be. 1 year had changed him in ways he never expected. The scar on his back was still there, a reminder of that horrifying night, but also a reminder of what he had been willing to sacrifice to protect them. Declan stood beside him, shaking his head with a grin. Who would have thought the boss would turn into such a warm dad? Kalen did not argue. He only looked at Sarah, looked at the 2 children, and felt a peace he thought he had lost forever 2 years ago. Sarah lifted her gaze and caught his eyes from across the room. She smiled, that bright smile he never tired of seeing. On the ring finger of her left hand, a simple but elegant ring gleamed under the lights. Not an engagement ring, not yet, but a promise. A promise of a future they were building together. Dad K, Noah called out, turning toward Kalen. Come here and watch me play. Dad K. The boy had started calling him that 6 months earlier, on an ordinary evening, when Kalen was reading stories to both children. The first time he heard those words, Kalen had frozen, not knowing how to respond. But when he looked into Noah's clear eyes, he knew the boy truly meant it. And he wanted it too. Kalen walked over and sat beside Sarah on the piano bench. Noah began to play a simple tune, tiny fingers pressing each key with careful focus. When he finished, Lily clapped and cheered, and Sarah pulled her son into her arms and kissed the top of his head. Good job, son, Kalen said, placing a hand on Noah's shoulder. Noah looked up at him, eyes shining. Am I as good as Mom yet, Dad? Almost, Kalen smiled. Just a little more practice. Lily squeezed in, tugging at his hand. Daddy, next year can we celebrate Christmas like this again? Kalen looked at his daughter, then at Sarah and Noah. 1 year ago, he could not have imagined he would be standing here, in a room filled with laughter, beside the woman he had rescued on a freezing snowy night, and the little boy who had walked into a bakery asking for expired bread. Every year, he answered. From now on. Sarah looked at him, her eyes bright with emotion. She reached for his hand and held it tight. Mom, Noah asked, will we still be here next year? Sarah looked at Kalen. He gave a small nod. She hugged her son and whispered into his ear. Next year, and forever, sweetheart, because this is our home. Noah smiled, the brightest smile Sarah had ever seen. Lily wrapped her arms around him, and the 4 of them sat by the piano in the warm room, with the Christmas tree sparkling and snow falling softly beyond the window. 1 year earlier, on the freezing night of December 23rd, a 4-year-old boy had walked into a bakery, trembling, asking for expired bread for his mother. The most powerful man in Chicago had heard him, and their lives had changed forever. Sometimes, miracles do not come from far away. Miracles come from the kindness of a stranger, from the courage of a child, and from opening your heart to love when you thought you no longer had the ability to love. Home is not the place where we are born. Home is the place where someone is waiting for us to come back. Today's story brings us a profound lesson about the resilience of a mother's love, about compassion between strangers, and about how life can always change when we do not give up hope. No matter how harsh the circumstances, as long as there is love and sharing, we can all find light in the darkness. If this story touched your heart, please press the like button and share this video with the people you love. Every share you give is a great motivation for us to keep bringing meaningful stories each day. If you have not subscribed to the channel yet, please hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss our newest videos. We would truly love to hear how you feel about today's story. What did you think of it? Did it remind you of something in your real life? Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts from the bottom of your heart. We cherish every line you write. Wishing all of you watching this video abundant health, a peaceful life, and joy in every day. Thank you for being with us. Goodbye, and we will see you in the next video.